Dreams are a mysterious thing. A succession of images, emotions, and sensations unexplained. Have we forgotten? We are called. Not just to the pulpit, not just to attend Sunday service, not just to give because we are told to. We are called to something greater by someone greater. The chaos and division, the world seemingly crashing around us, a sensory overload, attempting to recreate realities that don't exist. Likes, follows, views. Don't you ever think there's something more? Will you turn and acknowledge the dream you thought was too big? The dream that scares or overwhelms the average person. We are an unconventional generation. Dreams should go beyond what people around you understand. Jim Elliot dreamed of reaching the remote villages of Ecuador. Ralph Harris dreamed of equipping missionaries around the globe. Hal Donaldson dreamed of helping those less fortunate. Billy Graham dreamed of revival in his own country. These dreams were insane. These dreams were hard. These dreams were unconventional. Speed the Light is dreaming unconventionally, and we believe when students dream unconventional dreams, we can end the world's water crisis, fight human trafficking worldwide, equip all our missionaries with vehicles and equipment, and spread the gospel to all who have never heard. So dream. Dream the way God created you to dream. Unconventional dreams.
I am so excited about today, and one of the things that I have come to love the most about Real Life Church is just the heart for missions. And if you guys have been around for a while, you've heard of Speed the Light. You've probably purchased a famous Pastor Bruce pie for a crazy amount of money to give to missions. You've maybe come to dinner and a show. You've maybe eaten some mastacholi with us in the past, or bought some cookies from a student or a t-shirt. But you guys have always just been so faithful with giving, whether it's through Speed the Light, BGMC, or our other missionaries that we support as a church. And it's just really, really awesome that you guys see the need and that you want to be a part of the answer and you want to be part of the solution. So today is our annual Speed the Light Sunday, which is always really fun for the youth group, for students, for myself. And today I'm super excited to introduce to you Pastor Kirby St. He's one of my pastors. He's our district youth director. And if you guys have not met him, you're in for a treat. Here's the thing I have learned about Pastor Kirby. When you're with him, you're guaranteed to be challenged in how you love people, how I pursue students, and helping students find and follow Jesus. You're encouraged to grow closer to the Lord, and you're guaranteed to laugh and have a lot of fun because he's really funny. So please join me in welcoming Pastor Kirby this morning.
Thank you, Miranda. Well, I tell you what, that was quite an introduction. I don't know if, I figured out a long time ago that if as long as I know I'm funny, I don't care if other people think I am. And, I was at a restaurant the other day, but kind of before COVID hit. And what a crazy year COVID's been, hasn't it? I mean, it's throwing everything. I mean, I would like to say it's fun to see your smiling faces, but I can't see them. So, but, it's kind of one of those things of, I was at a restaurant kind of before this whole thing hit, and it took us a little while to get seated. And so I'm kind of standing there, and the lady comes up, and she goes, "Hey, sorry about your weight." I said, "You should have saw me 20 pounds ago." I mean, I thought she was feeling bad for what I weighed now. I mean, I can't imagine how she felt if she just saw me 20 pounds earlier. And so I ate a lot less that day. And I was at the grocery store, and the lady goes, Do you want your milk in a bag? I said, "No, just keep it in the carton." It's like, why would she take the milk and pour it into a bag for me? That would be ridiculous, But it's so great to be here. You guys are looking at me going, "You're an idiot." Yes, I am. And my kids don't even laugh at me. My wife is with me. My son is with me, my one and only wife. And Des, do you want to just smile underneath the mask? And my son, my one and only son, Caden, is here. And I got 2 daughters who are not here. And they are at Grandma's house where we're going to head after church this morning. And so it's so good to be with you. I get the privilege of leading the students of Minnesota in the Assemblies of God. I get a chance to oversee all of that. So 250 churches, all the youth programs. If you aren't familiar with the Assemblies of God, there's 250 Assembly of God churches in Minnesota. And I get the privilege of kind of overseeing that, running camps, which we didn't have this summer, youth conventions, all that type of stuff. That's kind of my role. And then the thing I love the most is I get a chance to talk to people about missions. Telling people about the things that are going on in our world that are messed up and in need of help and what our missionaries are doing and all the things that are going on. And so last year, just to kind of give you an idea, last year, Minnesota, we hear a lot of negative, don't we, about students? No? All right, we hear some negative, but there's so much positive that our students are doing. There's so many positive things that teenagers today are involved with and a part of, and I get a chance to a lot of times see that firsthand and be a part of that. And last year, Minnesota students, this is crazy. Last year, Minnesota students raised $1.8 million for missionaries. $1.8 million, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. The second closest state gave $700,000. So to think about what Minnesota students are doing, what real life students are doing to be a part of that collective movement to say we are going to do something that changes the world. We're going to do something. We believe as teenagers, and we believe our youth pastors believe that our teenagers aren't just here to take up space. We're not just here to kind of go through the motions of life and to kind of just go through, but we're here because God's created us with a purpose. And in that, we can do something that's going to drastically impact our world that's right close to us and the world around us. And so that's what I love, that I get a chance to inspire, encourage, challenge youth pastors. And this morning I get to challenge a church because we also know that $1.8 million doesn't come from just teenagers. That adults come along board and companies come on board and people say, man, out of my business, we're going to do this. And there's people that you've been a part of 30 for Freedom. And this year's already raised over $180,000 in that raise. It looks like it's going to hit $200,000 by the end of the year in one day of just people deciding, I'm going to run to end the cause of human trafficking. And I get a chance to go and travel and be a part of different things. So this morning, I just am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to challenge you, and the whole thing isn't going to be missions. If you're like, Kirby, I don't even like. I'm going to hit some other things this morning because I think the core issue and the thing that we're struggling with this morning is across our country and even our world is I want to hit at this morning. And so as we kind of get into this, my title this morning, it's not going to be on the screen, but it's going to be coming out of my mouth this morning is this, because you know why? Because I came up with it this morning. At about 6 o'clock, I'm sitting up downstairs, and I'm like, dude, here's where I had what I was going to talk about. I just didn't have a title. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody know it? No? All right, so here's the title. Here's what it is. Are you living with good intentions, or are you intentionally living your life? Are you living with good intentions, or are you intentionally living your life? Because you know what? During this season of COVID, it is transformed. I mean, how many of you at some point in the process you had to start working from home? How many of you have gone back to the office? How many are still working from home? The rest of you must not work. Like some of you didn't raise your hand at all. You're just like looking at me like, no, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. I don't even know you. But you know, it's changed things, right? And if we're not careful, it's so easy to get out of the cycle and of life and caring about people and loving people and reaching people, because now it's been the idea that we get to work from home. We can go a week without seeing anybody, or 2 weeks without seeing anybody, or 3 weeks, and the only person we see is our family if we're not careful. And so we get in this whole thing. The Bible, talks about the 2 greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, right? And then the next is love your neighbor as yourself. And we get into this time of COVID and all of the stuff that's been going on with the racial stuff and all the stuff that's been happening across our world. And it's really easy to just put yourself in a little bubble and say, I'm not going to do anything with it. But yet the great commandment that God left us with is go into all the world and spread the gospel. Go into all the world, go everywhere, and tell everybody that they're in need of a Savior, right? And now we sit in this spot, and we look at our life, and I want to challenge you with just a few things this morning. Like, it is so easy to go through your life and just live with good intentions, but never have any intentionality. It's so easy to go through life, and I mean, you think about loving God with everything. You know what? We here at Pastor Jim, you have amazing staff here. The pastors that you have on staff are some of the top in Minnesota. I mean, Miranda in the youth end. I mean, I tell you what, if we could have 1 million Mirandas in the world, this world would be a better place. The stuff that she does to care about people and invest in people, and I mean, she is the real deal. If you haven't spent time with her, you need to spend some time with Miranda. I mean, right now you have to social distance, or you might have to do it over Zoom, but however you do, but you have to, I mean, she is somebody that is one of the most intentional people that I know. But we get into this thing, and to love God with everything that you have is really, it sounds really easy. It sounds good, doesn't it? Well, I just got to love God with every part of me. That's so easy. But then you get down to it and you try, and it's really hard, right? It's really hard to give God every part of you. It's really hard to give God your thoughts, isn't it sometimes? Because especially with all the stuff that's going on, the fear that's out there, the confusion. You listen to one thing and you get this advice. You listen to the next thing, you get this advice. You listen to this, you don't even know who to believe anymore. You listen to one doctor talk about this. You listen to the next doctor talk about this. All this stuff going to control it in your mind. And then it starts to consume you instead of going, you know what, God, I want to focus in everything on you. I got all these other things that are pulling me in every different direction. Some are good, some are bad. But to love God with my whole strength, and with all my effort, and with all my energy, with everything I have, sounds really easy and good, but the reality is it's really difficult. The reality is it's really hard to love God. And then you put loving people on top of that, right? I know you've been in a series on the greatest summer ever. Part of what you've been talking about is loving your neighbor, right? To do that is really hard during this season. Why? Because there's a lot of people that don't have the same views that you have. There's a lot of people out there, maybe this is news to you, but on Facebook, there's a lot of people that have one view and you have another view, right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? And some people, I mean, you didn't talk about masks, right? I mean, if the devil would have known 100 years ago that he could destroy the church and divide the church by masks, he would have done it, right? I mean, for real. All you do is tell people they had to wear a mask, and now people are ticked off at everybody. Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, I don't know. Do I like wearing them? No. Am I going to wear them because I think it helps maybe other people? Yeah, I'll do it. If that's what people tell me, I'm not really that worked up over it. You know what I'm saying? Do I like it? No, I don't want to do it. But am I going to do it? Yeah, just because, maybe it's going to be helpful. Is it going to ruin my salvation or cause me to rip someone else to shreds? No. Because this whole thing is so good. The devil is so good at just causing little things to creep in and just kind of destroy you, isn't he? And destroy your relationships and destroy your friendships and destroy everything. He's just so good at weaving his way into the church in ways that we didn't even think he would have to. And yet the Bible says that the world will know we are Christians by our love, right? Yet the church is having a hard time loving one another, let alone the world. Right? So we sit in this spot as we look at where the world's at and trying to figure out where does this go and what do we do and how does the church respond? And I just wonder if the world is looking at the church going, why in the world would I ever come to a place when I watch you guys on Facebook, I watch you in person, I watch you, how you love one another, and God's saying love your enemies, and you can't even love your friends. And so I'm trying to get at this thing this morning of how do we live this life. And here's the deal. There's going to be so many things that take you so many different directions. If you're not careful, we'll just live with a bunch of good intentions and not be intentional about doing the things that God's asked us to do. Right? Well, it's so easy to get caught up in the stuff. Like Pastor Jim shares a great message and you hear it and you're like, yeah, I got to change that. And we walk out of here and we're like, yeah, I got to love people better. I got to get rid of my anger. I got to live in peace. I got to stop this sin habit, whatever it is. And you're walking through life and you're trying to figure it out, but it's a great intention. But when you leave, you don't put any steps to that. And we're really good at doing this in the church. We're really good at doing this. And then when we don't do it, we're really good at if we, I'm going to quit doing that. I'm going to quit looking at things I shouldn't look at on the internet or whatever it is. And then we fall back, and the church has done such a terrible job of making people, when you fall and when you fail and when you make a mistake, they've done such a terrible job of you think you're the worst person ever. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Right? I'm the worst person ever because I responded that I was going to do this, but now I'm doing this. And God's trying to look at this thing and go, no, let's continue moving forward and let's continue to grow. And the biggest problem with a lot of things is we quit when we think something's failure and God's saying, no, that was growth. You used to blow up at your spouse 3 times a week, and this week you only did it once. And the enemy is so good at what? At telling you, look, you did it again. You're never going to get past it. You're not going to get through it. And God's saying, no, last week was 3 times. This week was 1. And if you can go next week and maybe you don't do it, but the next week you do it again, and now you've gone 2 weeks and it's only been 1 time. You know what I'm saying? It's like this piece of the church is that for some reason our mentality is we have to be perfect when we leave, and that there's no spot and no room for growth. And God's saying, no, there's room for growth in this. Let's move this thing together. Let's try to get somewhere. Let's try to move. And so as we look at this thing, what are some things? I mean, in order to love God with everything I have, the only thing I can do is I have to be intentional about that. It's not just going to happen, right? And so I've got to do some things intentionally to love God. I've got to do some things. If there's a sin issue in my life, I've got to do some things intentionally to get that thing to keep moving it forward and to keep processing through. Does that make sense with you? To love people, I have to do that intentionally, especially now, right? Especially now when you have to social distance, when you have to wear a mask, when you don't go to work and you don't see anybody, when you look outside and there's just maybe not as many people roaming around, and we're moving into winter and it even gets less, and if we miss this, you guys, the church is in trouble. If we quit and we miss out on the last piece of that, we can love God with everything we have, but if we miss out on the second piece, it doesn't do us any good, right? It does us good, but it doesn't do anybody in our world good. And he's saying, listen, would you love God and love people? Would you come to a spot where you love people like you love yourself? We are really good at loving ourselves. I am anyway, right? I mean, well, you don't know me, but you're just like, yeah, you are, Kirby. You are. You're all shaking your head. Like, no, but as people, it's really easy. If I don't feel good, I don't want to. If I don't want to go do something, I can have an attitude if I want. We're so good at just making it be all about us. And God's saying, come on, church, well, we figure this out. But here's the deal. You got to understand that since the beginning of time, God was intentional, right? God was intentional. The things that he did, the things he put in place. For God so loved the world that he gave, right? It wasn't just a thing that happened by happenstance. God set up and said, there's an issue with sin. And here's the deal. I'm going to intentionally cause there to be put a Savior on the world. It's going to be my Son. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, right? So God's saying, listen, I'm intentional. You look at Jesus. What did Jesus do? He came to what? Seek and to save the lost. He was intentional about his life. He said, listen, when he's getting ready to leave, he looks at the disciples and says, listen, I'm gonna go. You go over there. Why? I've got to leave because you gotta get the Holy Spirit. I'm going to send you the Holy Spirit. It's an intentional move of Jesus getting out of here, saying, I'm going to send you the Holy Spirit. Why? So you can be my witness. You're going to get power to be a witness. And the church right now has missed out on the process. I think it's so easy to in this time period. We get caught up in not going to church. We've been watching everything online. Now we're starting to come back. But the church has come to, we're not seeing anybody. And then when we are in contact, we're ripping someone to shreds or making a comment on Facebook, or we're doing something that is just so what maybe God wants us to be. And God's saying, listen, since the beginning of time, God said, listen, I've been intentional. And what I want you to do is I want you to be intentional with this season of your life. You guys remember, maybe you don't, everybody doesn't know the story, but you ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Ever heard the story? It's in the Bible. It's in Samuel, if you aren't familiar with it. But it's an interesting story to me. And I think it describes the church. So David is out hanging out with the sheep, and his dad comes over and says, hey, would you go over and would you just kind of go see how the war's going? The battle, the Israelites and the Philistines were battling. So they're at war, and so, it's been happening for 40 days or so, and so David takes it off and he goes and brings some food to his brothers at the war or at the side of the battle, and when he gets there, he sees this big, huge Goliath man come out, this huge giant come out and kind of taunt the Israelites. So he starts, who are you? Is anybody going to come fight me? Whatever he's saying. At this point, isn't that important? But it is important, but you know what I'm saying. This is not what I'm getting at this morning, is what the words he said. But here's the interesting part is, so David gets there, and here's what had happened for 40 days. The Israelites had come out twice a day. It's really interesting. He'd come out 2 times a day, and they would get all of their armor on. They would put their shield on. They might put their war paint on, whatever they had. They'd grab their shield. They'd grab their sword. They'd go out and they would stand in a line on the top of this hill type thing with a valley in beneath. They'd stand there, and for twice a day, and the enemy would come out, or the giant would come out with the Philistine army behind him, and he would taunt them, and they would all go run in fear. And I started to look at that, and I started to think, man, is that the church today? We come to church or we hear about all this stuff, and we come and we stand across we stand at church on Sunday morning, or if you're at home online or whatever you are, and there's this maybe big giant facing us, whatever it is. It might be fear, it might be doubt, it might be addiction, it might be whatever. We got this fear that it could be the pandemic, it could be the racial stuff, it could be whatever it is. And we stand there, we look at this, and God's saying, here's what we do, is we do just like the Israelites do. Is we stand there when the enemy starts to talk about how bad it is or how terrible it is, what do? We run and hide. We run and hide. And I'm not saying there's not things that we need to be careful of. That's not what I'm saying. But the mentality when it comes to issues in our life, sometimes when God's saying, what I want you to do is I want you to overcome some of the habits that maybe have controlled you that are destructive. He's saying, what I want you, but yet when the enemy comes up and it starts to rear its head, like I told you never go, what we do is we do just like the Israelites. So when the enemy Goliath would come out, you challenge him, and all of a sudden all the children of Israel would run and they would take off and they would hide. And David walks on the scene and he sees this and he goes, what in the world's going on? And his brother says this. He says, let me read it to you, because it's an interesting verse. Here's what it says. He says, when Eliab, David's older brother, heard him speaking with men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here, and with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. And if I'm David, I look at my brother and go, what battle? I came here to watch a battle. I came here to watch you guys line up twice a day for 40 straight days with good intentions, but not much intentionality, right? Good intentions. Every time they came out, they had their sword, they had their spear, they had their war paint, they did their war cry, it even says. They did their battle stuff, and they got there, and they stand there with great intentions, but when the enemy showed up, they all ran and hide. And if I'm David, I'm going, what are you talking about? There's no battle. You haven't fought 1 ounce in 40 days. And when I was putting thoughts together a while back, this thought came to me in an idea that this is kind of like the church. As we come and we stand and we face the battles, the things that are in our life, and when the enemy rears his head, we kind of go run and hide. But then you look at David. What did David do? He's like, well, what are they going to do for the person that kills this guy? He's got this dream, this idea, this concept of like, man, if I could just do something, I could maybe make a difference here. And I know God in some of you has put a dream or an idea or a thought about something that could happen in your life, some way you can make an impact with your family or with your coworkers or with the people around you, you could get through some of the things you're in, and he's put that inside you. And God, all he's asking you to do is start developing a mentality of intentionality. So David goes, here's the deal. So they try to put Saul's armor on, it doesn't work. So he goes, here's the deal. I'm going to pick up these stones. He's being intentional about what he's grabbing because he knows it's going to work. He's seen this. He's killed a bear. He's killed a lion before. And he knows this is going to work. And so he picks the stuff up and he comes running at the giant. And I love this. Here's what he says. Here's what he says a little later in Samuel. It says this. 1 Samuel 17:46. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I'll strike you down and cut off your head. What a great visual. This very day, I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. I think we read the story and we miss this piece. The whole reason David did what he did was so that the world would know that there was a God. The whole reason he kills the giant is so that the Philistine army would know that there's a God, that a little teenage boy could come up and kill this huge giant. He said, listen, the reason I'm going to do this is so that the world will know that there's a God in Israel. And we sit here today looking at our world. It's a messed up place. Anybody know? It's tough. I mean, you put on the news and it's about another person being shot in Minneapolis, not somewhere else. You look at the issue of human trafficking, the number 2 place in the U.S., you know where it is? Minnesota. Number 2 in the United States behind Las Vegas. Did you know that's here in Minnesota? That you know at the Mall of America, there's a person, whenever the mall is open, there's a task force that's at the Mall of America that is just trying to combat human trafficking at the Mall of America. Every day the mall's open. You look at the issues in our life, and you look at the things that are going on in our world, and you watch it, and you wonder, and you question, and then Ephesians chapter 5, 15, and 16, here's what it says. Be very careful. Okay, when I read something like that, it makes me kind of perk up inside, or it should, right? Be very careful. God's about ready to tell me something that's super important about my life. And here's what it says, then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise. Making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. He's saying, listen, what I want you to do in the midst of all the stuff that's going on, in the midst of this terrible thing, the days, in these evil days, he's describing basically what we're facing right now. And he's saying, listen, but be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. In other words, live your life with some intentionality. Don't just go through, wake up and brush your teeth and eat breakfast and go to work and come home and not worry about everything else, but figure out, how do I live my life to make sure that I make it? When it's over, I've made it. When it's over, my family's made it. When this thing's done, my coworkers have found Jesus. When this thing is done, because here's the deal. The thing that matters to more than anything else to God is what? Is people. And especially people that don't know him. It's the hugest thing. It's the biggest concern that God has. In fact, he tells parable after parable about of the lost sheep. He says, if you have 100 sheep and you lose one, you leave the 99 to go find one. And when you go find one, it's an intentional act. You don't just sit there and go, well, I sure hope the sheep shows back up. The Bible says, rescue those who are perishing. Like rescuing, it doesn't just happen. You don't just walk by the pool and there's a little kid drowning. You just go, well, I sure hope he's going to get out of there, right? You jump in and you take work. It takes a little bit of intentionality to grab the kid, pull the kid out of the pool. Like this whole process is intentional. Like this process of loving people is make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. We're living in tough days. And the world it's divided and it's messed up and it's part this way and part that way and people pull. And God's saying, listen, would the churches come together and would you do the one thing I ask is go into all the world and reach people. Let me just start closing and the worship team can come because they want us to be done at 11. And I'm going to try to do my best to be done at 11:05. Just to be honest. But let me tell you a little bit about the world. I've been a part. I've been to Africa and I've walked into the villages where there's no clean water. In fact, I went to a church in Tanzania and they sat me down. They said, Kirby, you have to hear the pastor's story. I said, that'd be awesome. So I sat down and they started telling me the pastor's story. They said, here's what's going on. In this part of the Tanzania, there was an extreme Muslim area. And at that point, the Muslims and the Christians weren't getting along. It happens in some parts of the world. And in fact, they didn't like Christians so much that they were doing whatever they can to destroy the church and what was going on. And these people at this point, they were walking about 10 hours one day to get water, or in a day to get water, unclean water. And then they'd have to walk 10 hours to get back. And so most of the time it was women and children women and girls that would go get the water, and the guys would work. And so they were having church this Sunday morning, and the night before, some of the Muslims had come in. They were in the middle of a building project, and they unscrewed all the bolts to the roof. And when the wind came through that morning, the roof actually came off the building and came down and crushed the pastor and killed him. He was pronounced dead. Doctors came, pronounced him dead. Church started to pray, and he came back to life. A few hours later, he came back to life. He'd been had to go to the hospital. He's in the hospital for a few months with all these injuries. As he's getting ready to get out, they take his wife and they beat her up to the point you couldn't even recognize her. He walks out of the hospital. He walks into the hospital room of his wife and says, babe, I know this is awful. It's terrible. This is what happened to me and not what's happened to you, but this is where God's called us to. Well, a few months later, now I'm on the scene maybe a year and a half later. A few months later, somebody came in and put a well in this village so they could get clean water. I actually got a chance to pump water at the well. Now the line at the water well was, for sometimes it was 8, 10, 12, 15, 16 hours to get clean water, but at least they had clean water and they didn't have to walk as far to get it. And when they got that well, it completely transitioned the whole community in the way they thought of the church, transformed their mind. Now the Muslims love the church. Why? Because they had met their need. They met their need. It was amazing to watch. I just was this last spring, I was in a village where They had just got clean water and the life that was there. And I went to a village just a few miles down the road, and they had no water. When I say a few miles, it was maybe 100 miles from that. And we were going to say, we're going to put water in this village. And you could see the excitement, because you could see just, and I thought, man, the difference a little bit of water makes. Think about the difference of just being intentional. But a teenager a few years ago in my youth group, a youth pastor for 20 years. She was a 6th grader, and she was a brat. I don't know if you guys have ever met any. Ever heard of that word? Like a teenage girl, don't point there, sister. Hey, that was not very nice. That was not nice. I saw that. But she was like a brat. Like, she was mean to her friends. Like, if I was her friend, there's no way we were going to be friends. Like, she would say things. She would cut, you rip on them. She would say mean things to them. She was just mean. I remember we did a night where we're going to challenge kids to be intentional for 4 weeks. So for the next 4 weeks, what I want you to do is, would you see what you could do to raise money for people that are in need around the world? And she came to an altar and responded, and I was talking to her after service. I said, hey, what do you think God's speaking to you this evening? And she goes, well, I think God's asking me the next 4 weeks to raise $800 for people I'll never see. And I said, in my mind, I thought, you don't even like your friends, so how are you going to raise money for people that you don't even know? I'm terrible, right? That was my mindset, because she was a jerk. She was mean, she was bratty, she was everything. And I said, hey, that's awesome, Jada, but in my mind I'm going, you'll never do that, So I walk away, fast forward it 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and a guy from not even from our community called and says, hey, Kirby, I know there's a lot of people that have heard what you guys are trying to do, trying to raise money to impact the world, change the world. And I want to give you $1,000 or $2,000. I don't remember if it was $1,000 or $2,000. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to give that money as a little bit of help to the kids that were trying to reach a goal that didn't get there. So I called Jada, and I know she'd been working her tail off. And I said, Jada, how close are you to getting your goal? How's it been going? She said, well, I'm at $200. I said, that's amazing. Over the last 3 weeks, you've raised $200 for missions. That's incredible. I said, here's the cool story is I had a guy call me, and I'm going to give you $200 more, because I told her the story what happened. I said, I want to give you some money. I'm going to give some of your friends some money, but you got $400 now. And she got off the phone. This was on a Monday night. Tuesday night, her dad calls me and says, Kirby, you'll never believe what just happened. In the last 24 hours, she got so excited. She got much more even intentional about doing what God had called her to do, that she somehow in the last 24 hours has raised $400 more, and she's got $800. I said, I'm blown away. I said, I can't believe it. He goes, this is what I didn't tell her yet. I'm going to tell her tonight, is that there was a person in our community that heard what God was, what the kids were trying to do, and that said that if she could raise $800, they would match it. And so when she comes to youth group tomorrow night, she's going to walk in with $1,600 in 4 weeks that she raised for missions. And when she walked in that night, there's just a smile and excitement. She had met a goal and gone beyond her goal. And she walked in. She laid the offering at the front with a big smile on her face. And I'll tell you what, something happened. Her dad tells me this. Something happened that night inside of her that transformed who she was. Now she's one of the nicest girls, one of the sweetest girls. You want everybody to be around her. She loves people. The girls love being around her. She's got a heart for people and a heart for missions. Now she's bringing her friends, and they're coming to Christ. But something happened. Something changed out of a little bit of intentionality transformed. It was amazing. What our youth ministry, we had 3 or 4 nights when I was there as youth pastors where we take an offering for missions. We had 3 or 4 nights where we gave $40,000 in a youth group offering. From teenagers, not adults, where teenagers grabbed hold of a cause and they said, listen, with a little bit of intentionality, we can change the world. If we could do that over 4 weeks, I'm not saying they should do that the rest of their life, but if you just think the power of intentionality, the power of living with and being intentional with your life and doing something. And I just want to share this. This is interesting to me. Spiritually lost people in our world, I'm going to be done. They say there's 273 million people in the U.S. and Canada that they would classify as spiritually lost. That means maybe they've heard the message and said, I don't want anything to do with it, or they've never heard. 273 million people in the world. Think about this. 2,000 years ago, a little bit over, God said, I want you, the world, I'm going to tell you, go and tell everybody. That's the plan about who Jesus is. 273 million people in the U.S. and Canada. Europe has 517 million people that are spiritually lost. Latin America has 544 million people. Asia Pacific has 880 million people. Africa has 899 million people. Northern Asia has 1.3 billion spiritually lost people. Eurasia has 2.6 billion people. 2.6 billion. In the U.S., if you take one missionary, there's 900 missionaries or something like that in the U.S., and Chi Alpha missionaries and different people. And then you take all the pastors and you throw those 37,000 or whatever it is, AG pastors. If you just look on the AG side, it's a missionary or a pastor for every 7,016 people in the U.S. and Canada. Why is it needed that the church step up and do something? Because our ratio is not very good if we just look at staff. If you throw that number back to missionaries around the world, there's 2,747 AG missionaries. I know there's others. And to reach 6.7 billion unreached, lost people. That's a missionary for every 2.4 million people. Our odds aren't very good unless something changes. They say 3 billion people have never heard, and some of you are so excited for Jesus to come back, and I look at you and say, what about the 3 billion people who have never heard even his name once? I don't know where you're at this morning. But I do know this, that God's called us to get a heart for people, to care about people, to love people, to reach people, to share people, to invest our lives in people, to look at our lives. And even this morning, I don't know where you're at, what's going on in your world, but I know he wants you to be intentional about the way you live your life. Whether it's how you love your kids, whether it's how you love your spouse, whether it's how you reach the neighbor, how you reach the person on the other side of the world. He's wanting you to be intentional about that. And this morning, we're going to take an offering for missions. The youth groups haven't happened this summer for you guys, right? This spring, nothing's happened. You want to know what my needs are? I have 13 missionaries waiting for vehicles right now. 13. We've got $500,000 in water well projects that we're trying to raise money for. We got 250,000 human trafficking projects. I got 10 motorcycles they need to buy for missionaries, for pastors to go into places where they can't get unless they have a motorcycle because the roads don't go there. I got all these needs, and I got a God that cares more about where these things, about the people that are in these places that don't know Jesus than even the 99 of us that are here today. Saying, would somebody reach out? Would somebody make a difference? Would somebody step in? So I don't know what hit you this morning. It might be missions and lost people, caring about people, but it might be this. It might be a need, an issue in your own life. It might be the giants that are facing you. The giant the church is facing is all these people that don't know Jesus. Jesus is getting ready to come back. God said in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. He's going to do it. Will the church be involved in part of the process? Will I get enough inside me to love? When's the last time it bothered you that your neighbor doesn't know Jesus? When's the last time that instead of sending the terrible response on Facebook, you looked at it and said, the person I'm about ready to send this response to doesn't even know God, and it bothers me. It messes with me. When's the last time to think that people around the world have no idea who Jesus is, and we hear about him every week? And when's the last time it bothered you, or maybe you prayed, or you cried, or you reached out, or you invested, or you did something to say, God, I just want to be used by you? Because really, the reality is this. I believe the American church and the church across the world can change and impact the world. God is bigger than the issues that we face. God can bring healing. God can restore. God can bring life. God can change something in an instant. He's just looking for the church to get on board and say, here it is, I'm a part, I'm in. And he'll do some amazing things. Let me just pray over you as we close. And then Miranda's going to come here in a second, give you some instruction. Lord, I just pray over the church today, whether we're online today, watching, or whether we're here. God, we want to love you with everything that we have. Some of us are starting the journey in that. Some of us are trying to figure out if that's what we want to do. Some are in the middle of the journey and we struggle with it. God, but I pray each one would just make some intentional steps this morning. Lord, some of the issues that we face, some of the fears, some of the giants, some of the addictions, some of the habits, some of the things. God, that this morning we wouldn't just live out a good intention, but God, we would make some intentional decisions to live our life differently, to go forward, to make it, to go after the dreams, God, that maybe you've called or put in our heart for some reason to move on or to go past. God, for some this morning and for many, it's called to others that need you. God, I pray whether it's around our workplace, God, whether it's at the grocery store, at the restaurant, that we would be intentional about what we do. God, whether it's today about an offering, about sending our money across overseas, we'd be intentional about giving our resources, God, to reach those that will never hear unless somebody goes, unless somebody shares, unless somebody tells them. So guys, just pray over this church. God, whatever it is you want to speak, God, have your way. Do what you want to do. Let us be intentional about the way we live our lives, I pray. In Jesus' name.
Hey everyone, thank you so much again for inviting us into your home today. If you've been at Real Life for a while, or maybe today was your very first time, we want you to know that everyone has a place at God's table. Everyone has a purpose and anyone can make a difference, even if we can't physically be together right now. So to take your next step at Real Life and discover how you can truly make a difference, we'd love for you to simply text Real Life to 31996, and that's going to send you a few links. I really encourage you to jump into our online community, but I also want to direct you to our Connect card. It just asks a few simple questions, and it's a really easy way for you to find out your next step. Maybe you're looking to get connected to our life group. Maybe you're looking for a way to serve and become a part of our Real Life team. Or maybe today you said yes to a relationship with Jesus and you're wondering, where do I go from here? We want to connect with you. That is so awesome. And whatever that next step looks like, we want to get you connected into our community and give you the tools to do something great. Well, that concludes our service. Thank you again so much for joining us for Church Online. We miss you. We're always praying for you, and we hope you have a great week.